Well, I appreciate it.
I'd like to see that tonight.
I don't really want to give you a speech. I'd rather just talk with you and then take whatever questions you have.
Yeah.
If that's all right.
Yes.
I'll just give you a little update of how we got here. My wife and I have been on this journey now for 20 months. It's hard to believe. For 20 straight months, we've been campaigning. If you follow me on social media, you know, with no exaggeration, we've been on the road 5 and 6 days a week for 20 straight months for the chance to be your lieutenant governor. When we got in it, there were 11 of us in the primary, 11 Republicans. And we made a commitment when my wife and I got in. We set certain parameters. We're believers. We woke up on the same day. It's a very long story. I'll abbreviate it. She rolled over and said, "Why aren't you running for lieutenant governor?" This is 21 months ago. And I had been thinking about it, but I had not. I was scared to talk to her about it. And I said, "Why would you say that?" She said, "I don't know. I just, have a feeling that's what you're supposed to do. And I don't live my life by feelings, and I don't encourage you to do that either." But I had been thinking about it as well. And so we're believers. All 3 of my teenage kids are believers in the Lord. My mom and dad are my prayer warriors in my life, and they live about 3.5 hours away. So I called them and asked them to come like today and stay with us this weekend. They did, and 48 hours later, my family, we were off and running. We're like, let's go do this. Felt very at peace that this is what this time in life, win, lose, or draw, this is what we were supposed to be doing. And we set certain parameters. Number 1, that we would run a campaign to the best of our ability to bring glory to God. Number 1. Number 2, to run a campaign that we could be proud of and would bring honor to our family name. Meaning, we'd run a campaign that we would put the Weatherman name on, and we'd be like, we're proud of that campaign. And the third thing, which I agree is counterintuitive, totally agree, but felt very convicted that we were supposed to run a certain campaign. We were supposed to connect with as many people one-on-one as we could. And the reason why I say it's counterintuitive, I can't meet with 11 million people. I can't even meet with 3 million people I need to win this race. But that's what we felt called to do. And so the first fruits of our time, our money, our labor, our passion, everything has fueled our travel around the state so that we can meet. We were joking about me shaking hands. Absolutely. That's what we do everywhere we go. We went to the Trump rally. We went to all the Trump rallies, but we went to the one in Charlotte. I'll use that one as an example. And we got there. If you ever been to a Trump rally, doors open at 2, pre-program at 4, Trump at 6 p.m. Well, people, spend the night before, and the line starts getting big. Usually about 10 o'clock. About 10 o'clock, I mean, you've got thousands of people, 7, 8, 9,000, and it just keeps adding as the day goes on. So we wait till about 10 o'clock. It was 104 degrees. 104 degrees. It was all on pavement. Back then, 44 people. I checked the news the next day. 44 people went to the emergency room. They were dropping like flies. You could hear them, medic, and people dropping like flies. And at 10 o'clock, we went to the front door of that Coliseum, Bojangles Coliseum in Charlotte, and literally went to the front door and turned around. And the first person in front of us, I said, "I'm Hal Weatherman." And we went 6 straight hours. 6 straight hours through that line. No bathroom break, no nothing. 6 straight hours through that line. Did not get to the end of the line because my back went out. I got a bad back, and my back literally glitched, and I'm like, I'm done. I couldn't do anything. But that was 6 hours later, and we know exactly where they cut the line off. Know exactly where they cut it off, and I know the organizers of the event, so I know exactly how many people were in according to the fire code. And so officially 10,000, but it was really closer to 11 because the infill of the Coliseum they didn't count, or they fudged numbers, and so it was 11,000 people. So we legitimately shook that day 11,000 hands. That's just one event out of 20 ones. And so I share that with you because someone took a video of us doing that, and it's so interesting, and we posted that. Let's just post that of me walking through line shaking hands. 1 million people are viewed that. 1 million people. And I think about that. That's how God will honor. If you honor him in the little things, if he calls you to do something, I want you to do it this way, he will amplify it. He'll pick it up and say, you know what? You did exactly what I told you to do. And it would have been so much easier just to go inside and to go into the VIP section and to go in with all the other candidates and to try to get a picture with Trump and to do it. It'd have been so much easier. We got so much more out of that. And so I just share that with you because that is literally what our campaign is based on. Is we just go around and we meet with people, we talk with them. My opponent, Rachel Hunt, is Jim Hunt's daughter, former 4-term governor. So I have no disrespect for her, I have nothing bad to say. I've never met Rachel. And not running my campaign to bash her or anything, but she did pull out we have one and only debate, only one. Spectrum News, it was gonna be televised statewide, it was gonna be in Charlotte, it was gonna be at UNCC. We didn't negotiate any terms, we said we'll go anywhere, we're fine. It was gonna be on a college campus with 250 college students, right? Televised in her hometown because she is a state senator. And we're like, we're fine, we're good, we'll do it. And she did, she pulled out yesterday. And then when she pulled out, she told the organizers she's booked the rest of the campaign. Well, you can follow her social media and know that that's not true. I mean, it's just not even, you know, maybe every third day she'll hit the road and do one event or whatnot. We're doing, 3-4 counties a day and having it for 20 months. I'm not gonna judge her, I'm just simply to say, you're the ones who are cheated by that. And I couldn't think of a better example of the two campaigns. One is open, accessible, going everywhere, going to whoever you are, we're unfiltered, we take your questions, I don't care if they're hard questions, I don't care if you criticize me, whatever. Absolutely, because I wanna serve you, right? And the other's like, no, we're gonna stockpile money, raise money, stockpile money, probably go negative, dump a ton of money and just run on our name, and that's it. And I just disagree with that. And I think most people in this state will disagree. We're up in the polls, by the way. We're up in the polls. Yeah. With all the volatility that's going on, I'll just be real honest, even above me on the ballot right now. We're up. And have been up. We have not been down one time. Now, I'm not saying that's gonna hold, we don't know. And I do think she's gonna attack pretty hard here in the closing days. But I like her chances. I like her chances because we're putting the work in and we're doing, what I think is right. We did go to a runoff in the primary, and which was inevitable with 11 people. None of us clocked the 30% necessary to win. And so we went to a runoff and we defeated that individual. We got outspent $1 million to 0. By the way, we were the top, this is interesting, we were the top fundraiser. We raised more money than any of the other Republican candidates. We broke all records for a Republican candidate. We raised a good chunk of money. We chose during the primary and the runoff. I didn't spend one dime on TV. I didn't spend one dime on radio. I didn't spend one dime in direct mail. We did exactly what we felt called to do, field the travel around the state, meet with people one-on-one. That's it. And we chronicled it on social media so that people could feel a part of it, know in advance where we're gonna be. If they wanna come out, that's great. And we won 99 of 100 counties. We beat that individual in 99 of 100 counties and we won 75% of the vote. And so, again, I like our chances. I'll be severely, even though we're doing great with our fundraising, just absolutely great. It doesn't matter. I've talked to every Republican council of state candidate. We meet every 2 weeks on a Zoom call so we can compare notes and what's cool, what's working for you, what's not. All of us are doing great fundraising. All of us are gonna be outspent. It's bottomless. I've never seen anything like it. And I've been around this game for a long time. I've seen the funding disparity that Dems have over Republicans in the state. It's pretty significant. I've never seen it like this time. The other side is scared to death. And they know, as we know, this is the most important. People always say it's the most important election in your lifetime. This is the most important election in the history of the Republic, in my opinion. Our country is not gonna survive. We're not gonna survive if we lose this one on the national level. We're not gonna survive. And so, think about it. Last year, more able-bodied, military-aged men from countries that want to kill us came across our southern U.S. border than the populations of 6 U.S. states. People say we have 50 states. No, we don't have 50 states. We have 56 states now. Does that mean if we have 4 more years to it, we're going to add another 24 states at that rate? Another 24 states worth of people, all of whom hate us. They're not coming here for jobs. The vast majority of these people are not coming here for jobs. They're coming here to do something else. The next governor, next lieutenant governor, next attorney general of this state will absolutely, in my opinion, will absolutely have to deal with they'll call it homegrown jihadi-based terrorism. There ain't nothing homegrown about it. We allowed it to walk across our southern border. And instead of just saying, oh, we're gonna have terrorism on U.S. soil, no, you're gonna have terrorism on North Carolina soil. And it's gonna happen quick and it's gonna happen fast. And we are not prepared. We are not prepared as a state. The message I preach all around the state, and I have from day one, is prepare your families to stand alone in a dangerous world. Make them self-sufficient. And I'll elaborate on that. And then make your state self-sufficient as well. It pains me to say this, but our federal government, in my opinion, is the #1 perpetrator, the #1 pusher, the #1 advocate, the #1 adversary who's pushing ideologies that are meant to destroy our country. It pains me to say that because I believe that government at all levels is ordained by God. At all levels, that God desires our people to be governed, federal, state, local, county, all of that, if for no other reason than there's order, there's discipline, there's peace, so that the gospel of Jesus Christ can be openly preached in this country. That's my personal belief. So it pains me to say if any one branch of our government has gone off kilter. But you think about all these ideologies that are dividing us. If I talk about DEI, you know what I'm talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion, CRT, critical race theory, SEL, all these three-letter acronyms. All it is the DNA of the woke agenda. That's all it is. 99% of it is tied to federal funds. And then states take it. Here's the analogy I used. I use the analogy of the drug dealer. If you watch the drug dealer on the playground, the first round is always for free, for obvious reasons, right? The second that kid takes that drug, they're addicted to it. You can lace that drug from then on out with anything you want, and that kid will take it with a smile on his face until he dies. That's our state. Our state is addicted to federal funds, not realizing that virtually every funding source of the federal government now has been infiltrated by these three-letter acronyms. So that when you take that money, you're taking that cancer and you're putting it in your system. And it's gonna metastasize and it's gonna grow from institution to institution, and you're gonna blink and you're not gonna recognize your country. And that's where we are right now. That's where we're headed. And so, prepare your people to stand alone, prepare your state to stand alone in a dangerous world. A self-sufficient state can do that. A non-self-sufficient state can't do that. On the family side, I believe the family is the basic building block of society. My gut is most of y'all believe that as well. I want to strengthen our family. I think they're under assault right now. I tell young people all the time, because they'll ask me, what should I do with my life? What should I do as a profession? And I'm like, do you want to be the boss man? You want to be an entrepreneur? You want to own your own business? Yes. You want to make 6 figures, almost guaranteed every year? Yeah. Would you like to build a business that 10 to 15 years from now, if you built it right, you could literally sell the business as a whole for 7 figures? Well, yeah. I'm like, go work with your hands. Go into a trade. Go be a plumber. Go be a commercial welder. Go into HVAC. Anybody hired an electrician lately? Good Lord, they make more than heart surgeons, right? That's not going to go away. The tradesmen and women are retiring, dying, and both. Supply and demand's kicking in. These are good jobs, but our society still puts a stigma on those jobs, in my opinion. We still put a stigma on those jobs, and we're pushing, kids generation after generation into 4-year degrees. I'm not against college. I have a college degree. I have a master's degree. I'm not against that. My oldest son is in college. I have 3 kids. But we have to stop doing that. We have to stop pushing kids into a 4-year degree system where in many instances they're graduating, I jokingly say, with a degree in Egyptian poetry. And they come out $100,000 in debt, and then they can't find a job. And then they're like frustrated, they lose hope. And it's interesting, they've started polling the youngest generation among us now, the Generation Z, Generation Alpha, who can keep up. I'm Generation X. They are polling, so interesting, they are polling as a generation, as the most intrinsically pro-life generations that we've ever seen in our lifetime. Isn't that interesting? In today's divided world, especially on things like abortion. They are coming into life knowing that life must be sacred, must be special. There must be a purpose. I must be here for some higher calling. It's really interesting. Yet that same generation is polling off the charts as the most stressed out, anxious, and suicide-prone generations that we've ever seen. You know what that means? That means they come into life, valuing life, and then they encounter who? Us, and they lose all hope, almost immediately. That's a sad commentary on our society. And I won't have a magic wand if I'm the lieutenant governor, but the lieutenant governor serves on the State Board of Education, serves on the State Board of Community Colleges. I think I can do a lot from those 2 pedestals to remove the stigma of working with your hands. And why do I say that? Because I want people to know the dignity of work again. I think because we have lost, in my opinion, we have lost that in our country, that there's dignity in all forms of work. And when you lose that, you actually lose your purpose in life. Yeah, I have a fundamental belief that God put mankind on this earth, man and woman. God put man on this earth to work. And when you work, that is where your dignity comes from. That is where your self-respect comes from. That is where you teach yourself self-sufficiency. And self-sufficiency is an internal piece. These are my terms, but I like to clarify my terms. Self-sufficiency to me is an internal piece that God will put on a man or a woman when you are living your life in such a way that you are no longer dependent on any one thing, any one entity other than the good Lord himself. And when you are in that zone, he will give you peace. He will give you a peace, and that what he's really telling you is, you know what? You're finally now living your life in such a way that I can mold you and I can use you in my service.
And when you're in that zone, that's where you find your mission in life. That's where you find your calling. That's where you're fulfilled. And so when you lose the dignity of work as a society, you strand the future generations in all their hope. Does that make sense? You take it away from them. Where do you spend the vast majority, you're in your non-retired years, when you're working, right? Where do you spend the vast majority of your time? Work.
Sometimes people do it when they're retired.
Well, yeah, absolutely. No, I get that. So, I want to make our people self-sufficient. That's what I want to do. And I get it, that might not be the sexiest political talking point. But that's what we've talked about all of this campaign. It cuts across all party lines. It's because it's true. I believe, our job is to preach truth into a dark world. And so that's it. I want to call our people to be self-sufficient, and I want to prepare our state to be self-sufficient. I look around, if you've heard me talk about this, I talk about it all the time. We just talked about the southern border and what that's going to mean for all the states. I see trains derailing around the country in strategic locations, carrying strategic materials that in effect it weaponizes the train when they go off the tracks. I see barges mysteriously running into bridges that are part of our supply chain. And when it starts happening in volume, you start to realize this is a dry run. I see electrical substations in the center part of our state, in Moore County, in particular, being attacked. And I talked to the sheriff down there right afterwards, and he said, this is so interesting, they're attacking the parts that we don't have replacement parts to. Well, that's an interesting thought. That's a sobering thought.
They who?
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
That's the whole point, right? I see China buying our farmland still all over the country, here in North Carolina as well. We as people are smart enough to know if China owns our farmland, China owns us.
Oh, yeah.
They control our food, they control us. And the day that China flew that spy balloon over North Carolina, it flew over every one of our nuclear power plants. It flew over all of our critical resources. It flew over all of our military installations. And we as a people had to sit here impotently and do nothing. And that's when you know what, our state is not preparing for the dangerous days that are coming. I think I'm an optimist by trade, by upbringing, by faith, by all of that. I have a very pessimistic view of the world I live in today. I actually think that's why God has called me to run for this. I really do. Because I feel called to prepare your state for the days that are ahead. I think the day of reckoning is coming in this country. I don't care what that sounds like. I feel the day of reckoning is coming in this country. And I don't know what that means. I really don't. But I know that we're not prepared. And I do see other states preparing. I do. You cannot deny, if you look at Christie Nome down in South Dakota, or Tate Reeves down in Mississippi, or Governor Kim Reynolds in Iowa, Greg Abbott in Texas, Ron DeSantis in Florida. Just take all the politics out. Listen to what they're saying. Prepare your people. Prepare your people to stand alone. Prepare your state to stand alone. That's what they're doing. By the way, millions of people are flocking into these states. Millions. Why? Because man wants to be free. And it's almost proof positive that intuitively people realize, hey, something might hit the fan here soon. And I'm really worried about our country. We lose this national election. And so, we have to do everything we can to get Donald J. Trump elected, period. We're just not, if for no other reason the border alone, we're just not going to survive that. I personally think that the border crisis is deliberate. I don't think it's negligent. I don't think it's because they're inept. I don't think it's because they want their votes. I don't. I don't care what it sounds like. I personally think it's deliberate. And I think it's going to completely overrun all of our social services nationwide. All of them. It's just going to completely overrun all of them. And when that happens, the only force big enough to step in is the federal government. And if you ever want to see how do you bring socialism into a capitalist nation, that's how you do it. And I think that's the game plan. I really do. And so, and I'm not the only one that believes that. There are a lot of us that believe that. And so I tell people, do everything you can to win the national, but build your firewall. Build your firewall, because, if we lose that, it's going to be real dicey, the future of our country in the near future. And you better have limited government, constitutional, conservative governors, lieutenant governors, and attorney generals, and all the way down the ballot for that matter, standing in the gap. Because we're going to be your last line of defense. We're going to be your last line of defense. Our forefathers never envisioned the country that we live in today. They never envisioned the consolidation of power at the federal level, more or less at the federal level, and then offshoot it to the non-elected, non-accountable judges to make rulings. Listen, when the Supreme Court issues a ruling, It's issued on parchment. Even today, it still says when the Supreme Court issues, at the top of the parchment, it says, in the opinion of the court. In the opinion of the court. When did we elevate the court, the Supreme Court, to say that you have the right to, in effect, legislate from the bench? We did not do that. Our forefathers would roll over in their grave with what we're doing. And our Congress has abdicated so much of the constitutional responsibility it was vested with. And so your last line of defense is going to be your states. It's closest to the people. And hope that makes sense. Anyway, I'll stop. Like I said, I didn't want to give a speech that came dangerously close to me. I'll take whatever questions, comments, anything that you have. I'm way more interested in what's on y'all's mind. It helps me to know the state. By the way, I will make this commentary. I think everybody that runs statewide, that's just my personal belief, I think every statewide candidate has an obligation to go to every county. That's just my personal belief. If you want to lead a state, it's one thing to be a part of a state. If you want to lead a state, especially governor, especially lieutenant governor, and you're not willing to go to every county in this state, what are you saying to those counties that you admit? What are you saying to them? And listen, when a politician comes to you during election time, right? Let's just be brutally honest, right? It's in his best interest to come to you. It's in my best interest to come to you. Why? Because you have what I need, what I want, your vote. If a politician won't come to you when it's in his best interest, you really think he's going to come back when he's elected? Because at that point, if he comes back, it's in your best interest, right? He can do something for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just think I'm so disgusted with the political system these days. And I've been a part of the political system. I'm not ashamed of that. You know, I've worked for one family for 27 years, 28 years. Sue Myrick, the former mayor of Charlotte. She served 18 years in Congress. I was her chief of staff. And then her son is Dan Forrest. A lot of people don't make that connection. She's retired now. But Dan Forrest, former lieutenant governor. And I worked for that family for 28 years. I gave them basically my youth. And whatever political acumen I had, I gave to them. And I never thought I would run myself. Never did. I always was very comfortable just working for them and promoting them. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted Dan Forrest to be the president of the United States. That's what I wanted. I really did. That's what I really thought. I mean, hey, it's not crazy. Had he won the governorship, are you kidding me? Absolutely. You see, Roy Cooper was being batted around as VP. Of course, you're a swing state. Get him elected a governor at 54 years old from a swing state. Absolutely. But that didn't work out, you know. I was happy working for them. I never thought I would be a candidate myself. But feel very strongly that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I like our chances. I really do.
So you've been doing the political world for so long now. What skills or experiences maybe have you acquired that may help you presiding over the Senate as lieutenant governor?
Well, I mean, number one is the travel itself. I mean, don't underestimate if you say you've gone to all 100 counties. I mean, I went to all 100 counties multiple times when I was with Dan Forrest. Multiple times. You have to know the state. You need to know the strengths of the state so you can play them, and you need to know the weaknesses of the state so you can mitigate them. If the governor and the lieutenant governor does not do that, by the way, what other elected official is going to do that? Right? What other elected official is going to do that? Nobody. The answer is nobody. And this is where the Bible, you know, I believe the Bible will be true. This is what the Bible means when it says that people without a vision, what happens to them? They perish, right? They perish. So here's my question. What is the vision of North Carolina right now? Right? For that matter, what is the vision of America right now? And if you can't answer it, and the Bible be true, that means we as a people are in a state of perishment right now. So number one, you need to know the state. So, you know, to me, it's not a blow-off. It's not a PR thing to travel the state. I travel the state to campaign, yes. I travel the state to learn the state. Why? Because I believe these are God-ordained positions, and if God gives me, and the people give me this opportunity, this privilege, this honor, then I want to be there to serve them, because I think bad days are coming. And I want to prepare people to be ready. And I'll be held accountable for that. The Bible's very clear about people in authority. They'll be held accountable for their actions. So I learned the state, number one. My background was state and federal. I was chief of staff, Capitol Hill, chief of staff in Raleigh. It was really good. I was always a number two man. It's so interesting. I love my wife. She's a godly woman. But boy, she is spunky. She is a Southern Belle pistol. And when we started, you know, this run and all that, I'm like, you know, my entire career, I was talking to her, I'm like, I've always been the number two guy, right? Member of Congress, and I was the number two guy. Lieutenant Governor, I was the number two guy. And I said, you know, but now I'm going to, you know, if I win, I'll be number one. She said, no, you win. You'll be the lieutenant governor. You're number 2 again. You'll still be number 2. I actually thought about it, and I thought, you know what? That makes perfect sense. My entire career has been number 2. And it takes a different mindset to be number 2. It does. You know, you speak very openly, very freely in private with your principal. You fight sometimes and all that, but at the end of the day, you got to toe the line when the decision is made. When he or she makes that decision, then you have to back them up and go with them and take all that. And so, you know, I want Mark Robinson to win the governorship. I think Mark Robinson will win the governorship, and I want to be there to serve him. I think 30 years of state and federal high level interaction is going to be very beneficial to him. I'll give you one example, and Mark has already said, I've already shared this with him, we've already talked about it, we've talked all over the state about it, because we do some joint events together. If Mark wins, I would like for North Carolina to be the first state in the union that is 100% 287G compliant. And I want to explain 287G. 287G gives a sheriff the authority to deputize 2 of his or her deputies federally. They have limited duties, federal. What it really gives them access, because they are a federal deputy, when a person is intaked into the county jail for whatever offense, DUI, whatever. When they're intaked, right now you take their picture, take the fingerprints. With 287G, it gives you access to the Department of Homeland Security database. And then you can positively identify whatever aliases they're going through. And then once they serve their sentence, for whatever crime they committed, you have to put a detainer on them. And once that detainer is on them, they can't be released back into the general population. They have to wait until ICE comes and gets them. Now, we have sheriffs that don't cooperate with ICE these days. And yesterday, there was a vote in the General Assembly, just yesterday, in the Senate, to force sheriffs to comply with ICE. The second time this vote has come up, it passed. My opponent, Rachel Hunt, conveniently missed the vote, both times. She does not want to go on the record on this. You hear about sanctuary cities for the illegals. The way you have a sanctuary city, right, is to have a non-compliant sheriff. Because the second you have a sheriff who says, nope, I'm gonna cooperate with ICE, you can't have sanctuary cities. And so I want us to be 287G compliant. 287G was brought to North Carolina by Sue Myrick, my former boss, and I ran point on that, and I'm proud of that. We were the first state east of the Mississippi, this was 15 years ago, 16 years ago, to get 287G into North. We were the first state to have it in our state east of the Mississippi, and it was going gangbusters until Obama came in office. Then he gutted the program and basically dismantled it. There are other programs similar to it now that ICE employs and whatnot. I would like to bring 287G back. But, you know, if Mark Robinson wins, I win, right? If we maintain control of the Congress, and if Donald Trump wins. I know there's a lot of ifs there, but all these are highly probable scenarios. Mark has already said he will spearhead, and I will help him, right? This is my experience helping him, right? Try to get all 100 counties to be 287G compliant. So every jail is 287G compliant. What happens with that is the illegal element self-deports. In the like Mecklenburg had 287G, and it was very clear. The illegals started self-deporting themselves to South Carolina. South Carolina's going to hate us, Tennessee's going to hate us, Georgia's going to hate us, but that's their problem. I mean, this is where you have to kind of do it. The reality is they'll turn around and they'll say, well, how do we get a little 287? That's exactly right. If Donald Trump is serious about, and he's, you know, I think I put on here, deporting illegals, you know, he's going to have a tool to do that. The only interior tool, other than at the border, the only interior tool you have is 287G. There almost is no other way. Because then eventually it's just a matter of time before they encounter the law enforcement in some capacity of law breaking. And then you.
So basically you're saying every state has the opportunity now to to get them to self-deport, correct? If they adopt this 287G.
You would need a federal waiver. It's a federal program. It's not a state program.
Oh,
It is
okay.
federal. So that's what I'm saying. If I get there, if Mark gets there, if Trump is there, and Congress is there, a lot of ifs. But if we have Republican control, then we can go in and lobby and say, let's bring 287G back and let's test it in North Carolina. I personally think the second we test it in North Carolina, it's going to go like gangbusters. Like people are going to love it.
Sir, just to be clear, 287G was gutted by Obama, correct? And
Yeah.
then the administration, so it would take Donald Trump to re-invoke it, bring it back?
It would take Congress to do it,
Congress,
but
okay,
you know,
okay.
Congress
I
at
got
that time was following the lead of Obama, and so yes,
But I mean-
A strong president who wants to do something about the illegal element could absolutely say, if you put this on my desk, I'll sign it.
Right, President Trump would certainly help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got you.
And Mark is all about it. Mark's like, let's do that. When I shared with him originally, 287G, the background of it, and all that, he's like, that's great, why aren't we doing that? I'm like, well, it's because we're not there yet, but when we get there, we'll do it, so, yes, sir.
I got a two-part.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
When was that 287G taken off the books?
It's not off the books, it's still on the books, but it's grandfathered. No new counties could be added, so you still have residual 287G pockets around the state. I can't remember what we're down to now, maybe
I was
5 or 6.
I was actually noticing that this predates what we call now the Department of Homeland Security. It's a 1996
Sounds right.
era
Yep,
bill that
Yeah.
was passed.
yeah. It was Bush
And it,
when we did it.
looking at it from that standpoint, I don't understand why more counties in every state of this union have not adopted that as a safety mechanism, just in case your federal government decides, hey, we want 10 billion people in here, or we want 16 billion, or whatever the figure is they feel like is gonna be a perfect balance to.
Probably because the
Plan
sheriffs,
thing.
because the numbers have grown so large that the sheriffs, it basically backlogs their jails.
you know,
It takes up their jails, and if ICE refuses, if you have a non-cooperating administration, if you have a liberal administration, and they're like, you know what, ICE is not gonna cooperate with you, we're just not gonna come pick them up, what are you gonna do?
We,
Right,
for the last almost 20 years, when I first started, a lot of people that don't work in law enforcement or have to deal with it right here at your local level in Pasquotank, because I have, ICE is a joke. It was then, and
Yeah.
this is what was told to me by my supervisor and some people that had a more legislative wit than I did. Unless you got a charter bus.
that is a great
Slave-
song, by the way,
slave-
sorry.
I was gonna say that.
It was
Love
perfect
it.
timing.
Theme song of Casino, too, by the way, it's a great movie, sorry.
Unless you got a charter bus filled with illegals, it's not. They're just not. It's not worth it. But now it's turned into the federal government. They don't want it. Like they don't.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to have a mindset change massively, and it starts with the secure border, period, right? It starts with the secure border. What's so asinine is, when Trump came in the first time and he said, I wanna build a wall, and the other side just fought it tooth and nail, said, walls don't work, walls don't work, walls don't work. So, and I was just actually talking about this to another group last night on a different subject, but it reminds me, on several occasions, back when I worked for Sue Meyer, she was on the Intel committee, so we were very involved in terrorism, counterterrorism. And so I had to make several trips out to San Diego for work and intelligence related work. And while we were out there, that is where the pre-Trump, this is pre-Trump, where they were building a wall, okay? And they were testing, does the wall work? And what they would do is they would build like a 17-foot high wall. And could you penetrate the wall? Of course. It would take a lot of effort and work to do it, but you could. But they did double walls. So you had a wall, and then I can't remember what the dimensions were, but I'm gonna say 25 yards later, there was another wall, so it was a double wall. And in that one area, this was San Diego, which was a hotbed of people coming across, and a lot of it was jihadi based, terrorism based. It wasn't, just the human trafficking and the drugs. It was actually terrorists coming through, Hezbollah and groups like that, and that's why we were out there. But what's so interesting is 1,400 people a day were crossing in this one little area. 1,400 a day back then. And they built that wall and did it about 14 miles out. And double wall. And it cut it down to, I want to say it was like 12 people a month, which is statistically a secure border at that point.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're never gonna be full, but basically cut it down. And I asked the guy, I'm like, what do you tell people about, you can't build a wall, you can't penetrate or whatever. He said, you could, if you knew what you're doing, penetrate this wall, and you could make your way across and penetrate that wall. And I was like, okay, and he was like, but it would take, if you were an expert, 7 minutes. And I was like, and he was like, a Black Hawk helicopter can cover a lot of ground in 7 minutes. And by putting this wall up, we don't need people here. We can patrol with the helicopter and be there if somebody penetrates it. And just the lunacy of the left, that worked And Trump was gonna come in and put it down on steroids and put it there. And, no, it'll never be foolproof, and don't let those arguments be used against you. It's about statistically sealing the border to where the manpower there can cover it. I don't think people realize your Customs and Border Patrol agents, you'll have one agent out there patrolling 100 miles. I mean, it's insane. They're so outmatched, they're so outgunned, and the drug cartels are really coming across now and having free reign. And if you don't like Mexico, I'm not talking about the resort areas, if you don't like the governance of Mexico and the cartels and the corruption and the assassinations and all that stuff that happens, you have to have a secure border. Because all that's coming here. I would argue it's already here. It's
Yes,
already here
it
in
is.
droves now.
What county are you from?
I live in Wake County right now.
I was in Durham recently,
Yeah.
and I turned around from Roxborough Hospital, where Avondale Drive is, and I thought I was in a third world country. There was Spanish people on the beds of trucks selling tamales and elote corn, street corn, and I mean, it was just tons of what were probably illegals out there in that area. I couldn't believe there was
You're
that
seeing a lot
many
stuff.
of them
You're
together.
seeing a lot of stuff, you know, if you watch the news, like in New York City and places like that, where some of the gangs are starting to take over apartment complexes and stuff like that. And, listen, there were affinities back then. Again, we were just talking about this with another group last night, and I'm not gonna go off on this tangent. But we could document affinities between Hezbollah in particular and Hamas, but definitely Hezbollah, and the Bloods, the Crips, the Kings, MS-13, 15 years ago. And this is when we still had a border that was not overly secure, but it was a lot better than it is today. And so if that affinity, if that cooperation existed back then it's on steroids right now, because the border is wide open.
But we're also bringing, what
Oh,
are
yeah,
all
it's
the
worse than wide
Haitians?
open.
It's another whole side of the equation. I totally agree. So in
Which-
Greensboro, I'll use Greensboro for an example, because Greensboro is probably the best known. In Greensboro, there's a former, I think it's called Hebron Academy, it's a former school, boarding school. And I guess the school went out of business, and the federal government now uses that as a refugee. They've admitted a refugee resettlement center for unclaimed children that are coming across the border. Now, I don't care what this sounds like. I personally think a lot of these resettlement centers for unclaimed children, I think there's a lot of human trafficking going on there. I think there's a lot of human trafficking going on there, where, you know, when they are reunited, they're not being reunited with their families. They're being picked up by somebody who's gonna put them into a life of sexual abuse. And I know a lot of people in the human trafficking world, counter human trafficking world, and they're concerned about that as well.
What's the program called that we're flying all of them in legally?
That's what I'm talking about.
It's the resettlement?
Ultimately, it's gonna be the same type program.
It's the same type of
It's a
program.
resettlement, or
Busing
refugee
them to the
resettlement
border.
program. And, you know, are there a need, you know, I want America to help refugees and all of that, but number one, you know, if you look at the groups that are resettling these people, they're nonprofit, NGO organizations, a lot of them are faith-based, I would say they're more liberal faith-based. But they're not vetting these people. On what criteria are they vetting these people? On what authority are they vetting? On what expertise are they vetting? And I just don't think a state, I don't think the federal government has the right to come into a state and resettle populations in the state without the governor's knowledge. There's something wrong about that. And so, you know, I would hope that if Mark Robinson gets there, I mean, if I were the governor, I would pull the permits on that building. You can't force the federal government, they have a contract on the building, all that. Are the permits up to date?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. With permits up to date, you can't operate a building in North Carolina without the state's approval. And so, you know, there are other ways to skin a cat, but we need answers about what's going on at that facility. And if you follow that, I want to go off on that tangent, but there's a lot of people, Senator Ted Budd has questioned repeatedly, Richard Hudson has repeatedly, and they get stonewalled. They're not getting an answer. What's going on at that facility? How many of these facilities are in North Carolina? Who's making the decision? Who's vetting them, right? It's not right. And so I'd like to do my part to stop that. From the state level, I think it's more federal, but from a state level, we can make their life hell,
Yeah.
right? To say, hey, you're not gonna do it unless you're forthcoming with the information that we need, so that we're comfortable with it. I love, you know, people like DeSantis, who then, a lot of these resettlement people, you know, that were coming in, he would put them right back on the bus and ship them to Kamala Harris or Joe Biden's house.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they started complaining, we got a problem, right?
Right.
I love
Martha's
that.
Vineyard.
Sometimes you gotta fight fire.
That was
They
the,
did like that.
Are you and Mark pro fixing the election system in this sense.
Yes.
We need to get rid of early voting, get rid of
Amen.
paper mail-in ballots.
Amen.
Get rid of electronic voting machines, and
Yeah.
then you can't claim Russians are doing anything.
Yeah.
But we need to go right back to the way we were doing business before the 2000 election, when the Gore Bush nonsense
Yeah.
was made mainstream in order to convince us all we need electronic voting machines.
Yeah. I'm with you, I agree with you, and yes, you know, my day job, I don't know if you knew that, I run an election integrity nonprofit. I'm the president of the Electoral Education Foundation. I started it at 4:30 the next morning, the day after Dan Forest, after we lost the 2020, I ran Dan Forest's campaign, I ran all of his campaigns, the two that we won, the one that we lost. And I started that because in that race, there were things that I saw. I'm not an election expert, but I'm pretty darn close in North Carolina. I've run 15 races, 14 races, 5 of them statewide over a 27-year career. I never lost a race. That was the only race I ever lost. And there were things that happened in that race that I could not explain. And I had nobody to turn to. I turned to the GOP, nothing against GOP, nothing, crickets. Turned to the RNC, nothing, crickets. And so I started this entity. And just in a nutshell, what we do is we take a digital screen grab of everything the State Board of Elections puts out, every time they put it out. And so right now, the State Board of Elections updates the voter file every Saturday morning, roughly at 5 a.m. So our group takes a digital screen grab, I'm oversimplifying this, of that entire file. That file right now is about 8.2 million people. Each person has an average of about 300 lines of code attached to their name. It's just a massive file. We take that, we put it on our servers, we developed algorithms, we compare archives to archives. So we take this Saturday's archives, compare them to last Saturday's, to last Saturday's, to last Saturday's. Privately, quietly, through acquisition, through all different means, we have acquired 500 million historic voter records, dating back, I don't even know how many cycles, I could find out how many cycles, but it goes back a lot. It's like 20 cycles. And so we are the largest private holder of election data in North Carolina. The only person that would have more is the State Board of Elections. So I am passionate about this. Our system is fairly transparent. And I will, here's the check mark, I'll give them a check mark. Our system, in comparison to other states, is fairly transparent, and that's a good thing, okay? Our problem, in my opinion, in North Carolina, is that we lack what I call redundant fixed secondary points. If I write good sheriff here, the high sheriff here, if I write him a $10 check out of an old-fashioned checkbook, what's the next thing I do? Flip to my ledger, and I write $10 to the sheriff, right? Point number one, point number two. Why? Because if my books, if everything goes out of balance 3 weeks from now, I've got to reconcile and go back to where I went wrong and then restore all the way back up. Our election system in North Carolina, in my opinion, I know I'm oversimplifying this, we lack redundant secondary fixed points built into the system itself. That if you had those points, not only would it be transparent, but the reconciliation process would get, it'd be easier, it too would be more transparent. It would move from subjective to objective. Remember, in election law, you don't want a federal election law. Forefathers, election law is the purview of the states. You want all 50 to have their own way of doing it so that it can't be consolidated and used against one party or the other, and I agree with that. I can't remember where I was going with that, but the whole point is that in my opinion, that's what we're missing in North Carolina. Now, in other states, they got a real problem with drop boxes. We don't have drop boxes. In others, they have ballot harvesting. We don't have ballot harvesting. I'm concerned about all the above. I agree with all the changes you just agreed with, but our file itself, you can make all the changes you want. If the file itself is not secure, right, then it's all for naught. Put it like this, no matter what form of fraud, if a person is committing fraud, no matter what form of fraud you're committing, ballot box stuffing, ballot harvesting, transfer ballot fraud, provisional ballot fraud, same-day registration fraud, whatever form of ballot, whatever fraud you're committing, right, something correspondingly moves in the database. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Has to. So most election integrity groups pop up to focus on, like Mike Lindell, on the machines. Nothing wrong with that. Good for you, right? Machines. And then somebody else pops up and says ballot harvesting. And somebody else, and I'm in favor of all of the above. Our methodology is, hey, no matter what form of fraud could be committed, something's moving in the ballot. So reverse engineers start there, and then you're gonna have blueprints for where there are weaknesses all throughout the system. I hope that makes sense. I don't wanna go deep in the weeds on this, because people's eyes will
Wait,
close.
one thing we were talking about today with these duplicate ballots, my time on the board, I'm almost sure that when you entered a voter's name,
Yeah.
and it was anything near another voter's name, there was a pop-up screen saying to check. And it looks like if it's still intact, that someone's overriding that system.
So I can tell you again, I said I wasn't gonna go in the weeds, but I'll go in the weeds. The thing that bothers me, and I'll take your question, the thing that bothers me the most right now, or keeps me up at night, and this is so in the weeds, and I hope this makes sense, are NCID numbers. So when you vote, you don't vote. Your NCID number votes for you, right? And I'm in favor of that. That means if for whatever reason your ballot ever got compromised, your name wouldn't be on the ballot and they could see who you voted for. They'd have to know the code as well. Okay, I'm fine with that. Problem is NCID numbers, if you go to the DMV, okay, and let's say I need a new plate. I go, I pay my money, right? And then the clerk turns around and he or she hands me a plate. We've all done this, right? They're stacked up in the back and they hand me a plate. Let's let's say that plate is KAT1, okay? You know that 20 minutes later when the next person comes in and says, I'd like to get a plate, they pay their fee and they reach back. You know that that plate is KAT2. Plates are issued chronologically. Your NCID numbers are issued chronologically. And they're by tradition, not by mandate. And what we have found, because of our methodology, only because of our methodology, you would not know this unless there's a way to reverse engineer and take all the NCID numbers, right, that are being used in an election cycle and put them in chronological order. And what you find is there are huge batches of NCID numbers, 8,000, 9,000 at a clip, okay, that are not issued chronologically. They're taken off. They're basically taking off books, okay?
To save in case there's a problem.
Whatever. I'm not making I'm not making any claim. I'm just simply stating the fact. The fact is, state law says NCID numbers must be public at all time, and there are some that disappear. How do I know that? Because we take archive files of Saturday to Saturday to Saturday to Saturday, and the first thing we do is we compare, were there any changes? So it's clear as day using our methodology. These 9,000 NCID numbers were there last Saturday, and they're not there now. They are now in a state of disappearance. Okay. So we create a template and we fill those voids with disappeared ballot, disappeared ballot, disappeared ballot, disappeared, and we tag that. And we tag it chronologically so that if any of those ballots ever come back into the system, am I losing y'all? If any of these ballots ever come back in the system, it automatically puts them where they should be and it tags them. You just had a disappeared ballot reappear. This is groundbreaking.
Sweet catch.
It's groundbreaking.
And we've got voters with 2 different voter ID numbers.
Oh, that's rampant. There's all kinds of, what we have found is when they reappear into the structure, 99.9% of the time they're backdated. That is a red flag. I'm not saying it's fraud, I'm saying that is either an accounting, there's something that the State Board of Elections needs a forensic audit performed by the state auditor. I'm not talking about any one election. I'm talking about the system itself, what we are doing. It's the system, the process itself, because there are we have identified 12 vulnerabilities in our system. Our group, that's what we lobby for. General
Luckily,
Assembly's
Dave
basic.
Bullock says he will audit the State Board of Elections.
So Dave and I talk. Dave and I talk frequently about this. Yes, we need Dave Bullock to win.
Yes.
And I want to embed, I've said publicly, I want to embed an election integrity unit in my office, and I intend to do that in the Office of Lieutenant Governor. I'll make one change, one caveat, and it's not a change of policy at all. If Dave Bullock wins and we work together, I would rather it be embedded in his office, because his auditor's basically has state power, and I don't.
Yeah.
And as long as I would be all in favor of that, and I would love to take the staff that I have at my nonprofit and just transfer them over to him. I'm like, you take them. Whatever works, you know? So, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, yes, ma'am.
Well, this is sort of a different side of that, but, do y'all have any type of algorithm that's keeping up with students that same-day register and then are removed from the ballot? Because in our county, I find that a large number of those same-day registrants who register the last day usually of early voting before election day.
Like October
and then-
31,
Right,
yeah.
and then by the time they get both of those notices and they come back as, without verifying their
Yeah.
address, then they're removed, but their vote is already counted.
Right.
And I don't think it's just our state that it happens in or our county, but wherever there's colleges, because I talked to a man who was very knowledgeable in, some of the northern states,
Yeah.
which you assume those are Democratic states because they turn blue during elections.
Yeah.
But according to them, that's just the colleges that are in that state.
So I would say,
Changing
yes, I'm very concerned about a major vulnerability in our system in North Carolina is SDR, same-day registrants. That is, you have to go through a three-step process. When you and I go to register to vote through the traditional ways, three-step process, it takes about a month to verify you are who you say you are and you live where you say you live. Same-day registrant makes a mockery of that. Absolutely, there's not enough time to do that. You're absolutely right. People are absolutely voting. A percentage of those same-day registrants are absolutely voting without the legal right to vote. And they tabulate the vote and they do it. It's not just students though.
Yeah, I'm just saying they're just a whole class by themselves because
They are.
the idea that what I read in the law was that they were allowed to vote if this was going to be their place of residence on graduation. And that's never the case, hardly ever.
No, and the
so
other problem you
that's
have on college
weakness
campuses,
in the
right,
law.
yeah, and they run, at several campuses, they will use, the kids will use their, they'll take their iPhone in and they'll say, see, this is where my Amazon is delivered as proof of domicile, and the courts have ruled that, delivery packages don't prove domicile. So you have to be vigilant on all these things. On the same day registrant thing in 2020, we didn't know this in 2020. The first thing my organization did is we did a retro analysis of the 2020 election. We didn't go in to try to say, should so-and-so have won, so that's not the performance, the standards. What standards were they using in the performance of their job? And SDR, same day registrants. State law back then said same day registrant information had to be turned in within 48 hours of the end of early voting. Early voting ended on October 31. That's the last day you can same day register and vote at the same time. Within 48 hours, that i.e. basically election day, right? All that data had to be turned in. So using our methodology, we reverse engineered, went back the last 20 days of the campaign, not the 20 days of the campaign November 5th, November 8th, whatever the election day was, plus 20 days. We started 20 days after the election and went backwards. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And what we found is during the 10-day canvass period, the 10 days after an election, right, where the election is not over because it's not certified. All the counties have to hold a canvass. You have 10 business days to do it. At the end of that canvass period, the Secretary of State can certify the race. The race is over. During that 10-day period, 17,000 SDRs came into the voting system for the first time. That is directly against state law. State law says close of business 7:30 p.m. election night if that data is not in the database. There was no tool to identify that. We didn't find that until 6 months after the election. I remember calling Jim O'Neill, which is ironic since I beat Jim O'Neill in the runoff for my race this time. But if you remember, he was the Republican nominee for Attorney General last time. He was running against Josh Stein. Josh Stein only beat him by 10,000 votes. There were 17,500 votes that came in afterwards during that period. And I asked his people, did y'all know that? And they're like, no. Do you understand? Therefore, that could have overturned an election, right? And so thankfully, the General Assembly this time did make a change. They've reiterated that same-day registration data must be turned in by 7:30 p.m. on election night. The difference is our group exists now. So we flag everything. We're monitoring during the election cycle, the last 2 months of the election, basically starting soon, moving forward. We're monitoring all updates to state board elections like 5 times a day and archiving it. And we automatically, SDRs are one of the things we're doing. The second it hits 7:31 in our system, any SDR information that pops up automatically has a red flag on it. And if anybody is in a contestable situation, we will be the first ones to call and say, you should have your attorneys call us because we're gonna share that data with you. This is contestable data, right? I wish this existed in 2020. It didn't exist. By the way, we're nonpartisan. We're not a Republican group. We're a 501c3 bipartisan, nonpartisan organization. If a Republican was committing fraud, I'd be the first one to call the Democrat and say, hey, you should have your attorneys come check out our data because this looks contestable to us.
Do you think, in your opinion, do you think that part of the problem with election fraud is that there's not enough prosecution of it?
Yeah, but it's because there's never a victim and there's never a victim. And let me explain.
How do we
that.
prosecute? How do you, when
Well,
you find wrongdoing, how do you deal with it?
There's never a victim, and what I mean by that is think about this. If you went with, I'll go back to 2012, Dan Forrest. We ran for lieutenant governor. You know, Dan was only the second Republican to win lieutenant governor since 1898. Nobody thought we were going to win, right? And so we win that race. But we only win that race on election night by 11,600 votes. We have to go through the canvass, right? During the canvass, they whittled about 5,000 votes away from us. And we got down to 6,800 votes. So we won that race by 6,800 votes. So where did the other 5,000 votes go, right? They were subjectively taken from us, basically during the canvass period, right? That's why you have to lawyer up in all these different areas. Now, during the canvass, we lawyered up in about 40 counties. We hired attorneys and they went and watched the canvass meeting, and we filed 8 challenges in that election. One of the challenges that we offered was actually in Pitt County at the college, where the kids were using their domicile on their iPhones. And we came in and said, hey, you can't do that. And we had a volunteer there during the entire campaign who filed a challenge every one of the 21 days of early voting that year. This is illegal. I'm watching this, poll observer. This is illegal. You poll judge, have the right to stop this right now. And the judge said, no, we're not going to do it. And when they did that, they took those votes, didn't make them vote provisional. They let them vote traditional. You understand? Once that vote is tallied, it's thrown into the mix. You can never find it. You
Was
can't.
that on election day or one stop?
That was during one stop.
One stop ballots can be pulled because they're numbered.
Right. Well, back then they did not do. Okay, fair enough. But back then, okay, I'm just telling you the challenge we did. I don't want to go off on a tangent on this. So we offered a challenge on that. I'm using that one example. We had other examples. We had an example in Hope County, in Bladen County, in Watauga County. We had one in Durham. I think we had one in Memphis. So we had these challenges. Now, you understand the day that Dan was certified as the winner, we lifted our challenges. Does that make sense? Why would I litigate an election that I just won? It would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to litigate to prove what? A point? We just won. So we lift the challenges, and there's no prosecution because there's no victim.
Gotcha.
Because the victim says, I won. Now, flip that. Let's say you lose your election, right? And you offer all these challenges, right? A lot of people wanting Dan Forrest to challenge in 2020, not realizing, hey, we don't have the authority to challenge. We don't have the money. We're absolutely dead broke. We have zero money. And if we were to offer challenges, it would be millions of dollars. And we don't have it. And so what happens to the defeated? They can't afford it. Again, no victim. The number one reason why there's no prosecution of voter fraud is there are no victims. The winners take the ball and go home, and the losers can't afford it.
Wow.
That's it. Nobody ever thinks about it that way.
The other problem is that all prosecutions has to go through the Wake County District Attorney's Office. Unless the
Well-
law has changed recently.
Well, it depends on what you consider. So if you want to challenge an election, boy, we're getting deep in the weeds here. You have 100 counties. You have a canvass meeting in all 100 counties. If you've ever, who's been to a canvass meeting? I know you have. Yeah, okay. All right. Basically, oversimplify. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 1 election official. There'll be ballots on the table. The staff's probably already gone through the ballots, and these are provisional ballots. And it'll be like, y'all should approve these, y'all should reject these need further scrutiny. And somebody will come in, the election official will say the canvass is now open, and they will make a motion. Somebody will say, probably on the Democrat side, they'll say, I make a motion, we accept all these ballots. Right? All in favor? Right? Aye, nay, ayes have it, done. The second that happens, Those ballots are done for eternity, basically. Now, if you're there and if you don't file a challenge on it, if you file a challenge before they make that vote, you've got a chance. If you're overruled by that, because they're gonna vote on it that night, they're gonna overrule you, or they're gonna agree with you. If they overrule you, your challenge still stands, because you can appeal that challenge. Who do you appeal that challenge to? You appeal that challenge to the State Board of Elections. They're under numeric control of the same group that's over at that table, so theoretically, they're gonna reject you as well, but you do have that legal right to do that, right? If they reject you, who do you go to? Anybody. If an election is on the line, like an election could be overturned, the General Assembly. It's not a court, it's the General Assembly. General Assembly, if it's a statewide race, and a council of state race, and you've gone through the proper channels, the 2 appeal process, right? You can appeal to the General Assembly. General Assembly, it's in our state constitution, they just have never done it before. They can go out of session as a legislative body, return as a judicial body. And they're, at that point, they are a judicial body, and they make the decision. Our group creates actionable data. That's all we're doing. We're creating actionable data so that if you find yourself in that situation during that 10 business days, you can take that data and you can go through the proper channels, right? And ultimately, if you needed to appeal it to the General Assembly, you could. I wish this would have existed. I'm convinced that Pat McCrory, re-elect was stolen, just flat out, just stolen. And I wish this, tool would have existed back then to help him during that crucial period.
Are you doing a challenge or a protest?
I'm not doing either.
Well, I mean,
I'm just providing the
are you
data.
talking about a challenge or a protest?
I'm not doing, our group doesn't do either.
I understand that, but as far as the way that you do it, because we can challenge ballots before 5 o'clock on election day that were filed on at one stop.
All I'm saying is if you are in a, the meeting, the canvas meeting,
Right,
if you don't make the challenge or the protest, at that point,
okay.
once that vote on those ballots are over,
The election's over.
it's over for you. You can't challenge, there is no other avenue to challenge those ballots ever again. That's your last line. And most campaigns lack the data that they need at that moment, because these canvases are going like that, and they're in all 100 counties, and they have to be noticed 24 hours, so 24 hours after the election.
The information's not there accessible. Yes.
Absolutely. And think about what you're doing. If you are worried about systematic fraud, you're asking the fox to guard the hen house. Right? You're asking them, hey, we think y'all might have done something fraudulent. Can you give us the information that would help us prove that? They're not gonna do that. Plus, they're under no statutory mandate to do that within a reasonable period of time. The only thing you could do would be the equivalent of a FOIA request, Freedom of Information request, which is,
Might take another 6 months.
oh, at least, because there's no law that defines FOIA, time limit in North Carolina. Sorry, I'm way off. I'm probably.
I'm sorry, you're in a room full of election people.
No, I love
Observers
it.
and-
I love it. I just don't wanna make your eyes go
I
off of it.
appreciate that you understand
I
the
do.
problems,
Yeah,
because so few people do.
I lost a race because of it. That's how I look at it.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask is your group, are you aware of another group that is active in all the 100 counties to verify our vote in terms of, in our county, we started 4 years ago after 2020, enforcing all the laws, all the privileges that we had as observers. And included in that was checking our ATVs
Yeah.
all during the day, verifying who
Yeah.
those voters were, and counting, taking pictures of the tapes at the end of the day, and adding up all our precincts, and then going to all the canvas meeting and adding up the absentee ballots. So
Yeah.
we knew, when the election is announced, the
Right.
winners, we know exactly what the totals are supposed to be.
Right.
So if that's not what they announce,
If all of a sudden
then we
800
know,
more ballots show
right,
up.
we know
Right.
that something, so is there anybody that's doing that statewide that you know of?
I mean, the closest would probably be Jim Womack's group, if you know Jim Womack. Insight, and I can't remember what their acronym is, NCEITE or something like that. Probably his group would be, they have like 12 different criteria of what they do. Most of what I would describe them as is less the data and more the process. And I think that's healthy. In other words, they're very involved as poll observers, training people, what to look for, what's right, what's wrong, all the things you just described, they're involved in some of that. And they are statewide. So if you're not talking with them, you might wanna talk with them sometime.
Well, I do, I go on there,
Yeah.
but I was wondering if there's anybody that's actually training each county to verify that vote, so that we could take 100
I would say no.
counties and add that all up and say.
I would say no, unless the party is Dave Warren, the election integrity guy, and the state party, if they're doing trainings around the state through the party mechanism. So I don't know if they are or not. They might be doing it in some counties. All right, one more question, because I know I've probably way exceeded my time.
It may seem crazy, but been thinking about it for a good while. I've had several people ask me about if they think we're gonna have a civil war out of all this, because with all these illegals coming in and more to come, regardless of who gets elected, is for the White House, is there a chance that they could start a civil war in this country?
You know, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I think the fine line between civilization and chaos is a fine line. And we take for granted that in the United States. We think, oh, that could never happen here. Why couldn't it happen here? And so I hope that doesn't happen. I would not want to see that happen. But I think people, you know, the definition of chaos is when otherwise law-abiding people commit crimes because they feel they have no choice. And there's a great book, it's called 1 Second After, if you've never read it. It's kind of related. It's about an EMP attack, what would happen. It's a fiction book, but it was written by a guy named William Forsythe, who is from Black Mountain, North Carolina. And it's actually based in North Carolina. Newt Gingrich wrote the foreword to it. You should read that book because it talks about what it really is, a fiction book of how people will act in a time of a national emergency that is very chaotic, whether it's civil or an EMP attack or nuclear attack or whatever. And it's very interesting. And the whole point of the book is, hey, chaos is not when lawbreakers break the law. Chaos are when the law-abiding people start to break the law because you put them back against the law. And that's the whole point of this book. And it's an excellent read. I highly recommend that you read that. But no, I think there's a fine line between chaos and civilization. And, you know, we're divided as a people. Racially, economically, spiritually. We're divided in so many different ways. And then when you break down the southern border and you allow basically it to be bum rushed by a multitude of people who might have, you know, we take for granted that they might come in here and they're also haphazard. They're from all different countries and they have different beliefs and all that. What happens if it's methodical? What if the Chinese nationals that are coming across in the hundreds of thousands actually have a game plan, right? What if some of the jihadi-based individuals are coming in and their affinity is with Hezbollah or Hamas or one of these other organizations, and they're not coming in for a job, they're coming in to do something that they feel called to do?
If they're flying to the Twin Towers to do about anything.
Of course they will. And so, no, I think you have to think about another reason why your state needs to be self-sufficient. We need to be self-sufficient as a people. We need to be able to defend ourselves and to prepare for dark days. So, but I don't know. I mean, I hope that never happens, obviously. Yes, sir.
In the vein of the last comment, I've asked this of every potential candidate that I've come across.
Yeah.
Given the opportunity to be lieutenant governor,
Yeah.
what would you do to stem the tide of Marxist activity coming into the state of North Carolina?
Well, I personally think DEI and CRT and all the derivatives of it is Marxist in origin. I mean, there seems to be pretty ample evidence that it's a form of class warfare. It's meant to divide us. So right off the bat is to get rid of the ideologies that are basically, you know, propagating that. You know, once that goes into a school system, then you're basically 12 years away from a whole generation of kids being indoctrinated.
Mm-hmm.
And what did Hitler say, right? Give me the kids. What did he say? You know, give me the kids for a decade and I'll run
Give you
the
the
country.
skills, I'll give you the people.
Right, exactly.
I
And
don't need to
so-
run for office, I already have their children.
Sure, and so, you know, that would be number one. And by the way, just as a side note, DEI was never passed by the General Assembly, wasn't ordered by a judge, was never voted by referendum, the people never put it in place. DEI was put in our school systems by executive order of Governor Cooper. By stroke of a pen, he said, I hereby create the office of DEI in the Wake County school system. They went out and found pass-through federal funds, a grant, bypassed the General Assembly, and said, this money is there, we should get free money. They're like, sure, whatever, get the money, put it in there. And again, like cancer, now every school system has the DEI. They said, oh, that's how we did it, that's how we're gonna do it. So right off the bat, if DEI was put into the school system by executive order, DEI could be taken out of the school system by executive order. And that'll be one of the easier ones to get rid of. And, but I think that's where it starts, right? Marxism is an ideology, so you have to go to the source of the ideology and eliminate it. And so, yes, I would do that. I'll be on the State Board of Education. I'll be on the State Board of Community Colleges. DEI exists in both.
Well, that brings me to my
Yeah.
next point.
Yeah.
And that is, I've noticed a concerted effort by a media that's really cozy with the state
Yeah.
to support that Marxist ideology. And it's gonna be hard for you or anybody on the right to be
Yeah.
able to challenge that without a good education program.
Yes.
That's a field that I see is wide open right now. One of the people that I grew up listening to, Rush Limbaugh, called it a teachable moment.
Yep.
And I feel like that, with the work that you've done in monitoring the votes, it might be another thing that we need to monitor is the way our media is acting, the way that they're maybe not coming out in America's best interest, but yet they still have a broadcast license.
Yeah.
They're still on the air, but yet they'll point to you and say, you're a purveyor of mis and disinformation when you're trying to get the truth out.
Yeah.
I had my YouTube account at one time taken away, right before January the 6th.
Yeah.
And I recognize that we're living in a different time now, that it's that close. You said a
It is
thin
that
line a
close.
while ago. You said a thin line.
You just
And
look
it
at
really
places
is.
like Australia, who were very conservative, they were very rule of law oriented, took their guns, and less than 10 years, not even 10 years, it's completely different country. And so, you know, right now the problem with the left is they absolutely want to take our Second Amendment rights. And at the same time, they're not even waiting. At the same, remember, there is no First Amendment. There is no First Amendment without the Second. The Second is what guarantees the first, right? So they're going after the Second every chance they get, but they're not even waiting. They're going after the first as well. The censorship on social media platforms is unreal. If you're a conservative, you get put in Facebook jail. They tinker with our account all the time, and I talk to other conservatives as well. They shadow ban, they do all kinds of stuff. You boost something, it doesn't boost. You miss the window of opportunity, you can't get your message out. It's funny how we're always glitching during the key moments when things need to glitch. It's just what they do, right? But yes, it's a dangerous world we live in now. Like this is precarious. You start getting into social credit scoring and things like that as well. If you're not following that, that's the next frontier as well. The woke agenda is to start creating a social credit score. How do you stand on the environment? How do you stand on social justice? How do you stand on DEI? And based on your criteria, you're given a score, and that score is then shared with all the DEI departments at all the banks and all the tuition places and everywhere that you're financially dependent on. And they're like, yes, we would lend this to you at 5% interest, but because your score is so low on these issues, we're gonna lend it to you at 12% interest. Do you understand what's about to happen in our country? This is a real thing. This is actually happening, right? And if the left takes over, this is gonna be there. And this is how you impose, right? This is how you impose ideologies. It's compulsory. They're compelling you to do it, whether you believe in it or not.
It's fundamentally unconstitutional.
Of course
we
it
know
is.
that, but I have not seen an easy way to battle that other than
Brother, there ain't nothing easy. From now on, there's nothing easy. We are on the defense now.
Elect the
We're
right
not
people.
on the
That's the
precipice
only way.
of a slippery
It's the only
slope.
way.
We are down that slope. We are in a deep, muddy pit right now. And we're gonna have to dig out of it. And I don't think the salvation is gonna come from Washington. I think it's gonna come from the states.
You already got all the information you need to do the social standardization score, and just look at social media. You can glean all that from all your Facebook accounts, all your social media accounts. It's all out there.
Yeah.
It's all out there.
And
I
we're
mean-
toast.
I mean, we're fooling ourselves. I mean, Facebook's one of the worst things. That's okay. I should be talking like this because I'm a reporter. But I mean, you know, it's probably the worst thing that's happened to our democracy as far as I'm concerned. Facebook.
Like anything, it's a tool. It can be a tool for good. It can be a tool for bad. I mean, that's the nature of evil itself. Evil exists in the world, so evil's gonna corrupt anything that's good, anything that's pure, anything that's righteous, it's gonna attempt to corrupt, right? So, you know, it's not the tool that's bad, right? It's the application of the tool. It's just like, you know, it's not the weapon, right? It's the person shooting the weapon.
All those,
You always have to remember that, right?
all those photos we put out there of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank y'all. I'm sorry if I rambled. way
No,
too
you're
long.
fine.
Thank you so much.
So we know you're about to go by the Republican Party
Yeah.
watch party. That's fantastic. Thank you for coming here.
Yeah.
What you've got here is a group of a mix of Republicans and unaffiliated conservatives that are going to work hard for you, and we hope you also talk to some more unaffiliated conservatives too, because that'll help get you in.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
Thank you.
You have yard signs?
We do have some signs. You have,
I have a few in the bus, yeah.
you have a few in the bus? I tell you what, we'll get them out, and we'll stack them right here on, right beside this door, and y'all just take whatever's left behind, just keep them
Great,
here, please.
perfect.
We got a bunch.
Or we'll take them down to the headquarters, one of the two.
Yeah.
Paul, can we get you to give a closing benediction for us?
Father, thank you for the information that's been distributed tonight. We appreciate the fact that we live in a country where we can have free will, we can vote. And I pray that the folks in this country, in this state, will stand up for what's right, for what you think is right, not what's in our opinion is right. But we thank you for that ability. We pray you'll guide us and strengthen us, and appreciate this candidate. He is a faithful believer, and we pray that you'll bless him everywhere he goes. Thank you in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
And everybody, we've got our tidal wave tickets for $10. They're good for next August 31st. We've got some drum hats, Trump flags.
Okay.